On the night of my arrival, the first time that I was officially there, a very strange thing happened. The staff was dining off damask with enough cutlery to do a kidney operation. The cooks in the kitchen were prisoners of war. Chefs from important German restaurants. When all of a sudden, a man walked in, dressed in civilian clothing, but beautifully dressed, beautifully polished shoes, well-fed civilians were to be suspected, because it meant you were not in the resistance. You were not a victim. You were a victimizer. He introduced himself to me. He sat opposite. He was my table mate. He said his name was Pompey, Major something Pompey. I said, Major of what? SS Panzer. I was dining with a murderous Nazi. And I said, what are you doing here? You people are murderers. And he said, yes, we are the scum. We always rise to the top.
The Germans lost the war, but the Nazis never went anywhere. Have you ever heard anybody say that? Because it's really true. And indeed, they've continued with their goals up till today. I'm always flummoxed at how so many people don't know anything about this topic. So I thought I'd do a video to bring the newbies up to speed and maybe give some more knowledgeable people a few more morsels of information to put in their bag of tricks. But anyway, I'll start with Operation Paperclip. It was called a conspiracy theory for years and years until it was declassified and the internet came along and information began to be exchanged, and now it's considered to be just an established fact because it is an established fact. Anyway, Operation Paperclip was a covert program run by the United States government during the late 40s and early 50s. Its purpose was to recruit and employ German scientists, engineers, and technicians, particularly those who had worked on advanced military technologies during World War II. The program was initiated by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency and was primarily focused on obtaining knowledge related to rocketry and missile technology, as well as chemical and biological warfare. And it wasn't just those guys either. They brought over doctors too, psychiatrists in particular. They settled them all around San Antonio, Texas, where they began all kinds of mind control experimentation. So anyway, we did a deal with the devil for sure and brought these guys over. And I'll go into that a little more in a minute. One of the most well-known figures brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip was Wernher von Braun, a German aerospace engineer who played a key role in the development of the V-2 rocket for Nazi Germany. After the war, von Braun and his team were brought to the United States, where they worked on the development of ballistic missiles and eventually became instrumental in the American space program, including the Apollo missions to the moon. And there's anecdotal evidence to suggest that he was maintaining contact with all of his Nazi buddies down in South America the whole time, sharing information with them. Now, this guy put us on the moon. He did. And yet was an SS major. I couldn't really find any pictures of him in his uniform, though, but the one in the lower left shows him walking behind old Heinrich Himmler himself. You can barely see him back there. That's probably the reason why it didn't get scrubbed. Every picture you can find of him shows him in a business suit, standing around like he's a civilian, but he wasn't a civilian. You don't get to be an SS major without being a Nazi, a full-blown, dyed-in-the-wool Nazi. One of his little ideas at the end of the day to execute prisoners who had done the least work. So at the end of the day, they'd pick out the guy who'd done the least work and they'd hang him in front of everybody else. That was one of his little ideas to motivate men. Anyway, yeah, we rehabilitated his public persona, and Lord, I saw this guy a million times on national TV with presidents, politicians, and pundits, because he was one of the good Germans, supposedly. And let's take a look at some of the others. There were thousands of people. These are just a few of the more noteworthy, but anyway. Arthur Rudolph, a German rocket engineer who worked on the V-2 rocket program and later played a significant role in the development of the Saturn V rocket for NASA. Saturn V rocket was the one that got him to the moon. Kurt Blome, a German scientist who was involved in biological warfare research for the Nazi regime. He worked for the U.S. Army Chemical Corps. Hubertus Strughold, a German scientist who made significant contributions to the field of space medicine. He was accused of being involved in human experimentation at the Dachau concentration camp. Walter Schreiber, a German medical officer who was involved in medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. He was later recruited by the U.S. Army to work on biological warfare research. So as you can see, man, these guys, they got around, and we certainly helped them. Oh, next, an oldie but a goodie. I remember this. Kurt Waldheim was an Austrian diplomat and politician who served as the Secretary General of the United Nations from 1972 to 1981 and was the President of Austria from 1986 to 1992. However, his career was overshadowed by revelations about his Nazi past. So while he was the Secretary General, somebody spilled the beans on him. He probably pissed somebody off, and they spilled the beans on him, because there's no way you could get to be at this high a level in society without people knowing about this kind of shit. But anyway, after that, he was elected the president of Austria. Now, so here you have it. Heads of state who were Nazis. There's a picture of him there in his uniform down there. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, they were friends with, he was friends with Waldheim, and he invited Waldheim to his wedding in 86. And, you know, Schwarzenegger openly joked and laughed about his being a Nazi, and to this day, he's never apologized for it. He had that guy to his wedding. So ask yourself, how many more of these lizards were scurrying around underneath the rocks of society, and no one knew about it, and to this day don't know about it? How do you know? Next, the rat lines. No Nazi video would be complete without a mention of the rat lines. These were networks of people who smuggled Nazis out of Europe and down to South America. One of the most well-known rat lines was the Vatican rat line, or the monastery route, they called it, which was organized by Catholic priests and officials, including Bishop Alwa Hudal and Father Krunoslav Dragonovich. This rat line helped Nazi war criminals and collaborators escape to South America, particularly Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. So what they'd do is they'd move them from monastery to monastery, church to church, and then finally, eventually get them down to the coast and then put them on a ship and send them off to South America. Probably the most infamous criminal to escape like this was Joseph Mengele. He escaped and lived his entire life, the rest of his life in South America, using his own name. He called himself Jose Mengele, but still, you know, that's close enough. There's anecdotal evidence to suggest he continued his experimentation on twins for the rest of his life. And he died on a beach in Brazil in 1985. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I tell people about that, and they snicker and laugh. And no, I mean, he got away. His own son visited him. I saw his son on a national television talk show once talking about it. They were all talking about it after his death. And then, you know, they dug his bones up and did DNA, and sure shit, that was him. Died on a beach in Brazil, and it's my understanding he had a couple of hotties with him, but I'm not sure about that part. But anyway, he got away with the full cooperation of a lot of people who should have known better or should have done better. Anyway, those are the rat lines. Now, here's where it gets really juicy, and so you need to pay attention here because this is where it's at. The Red House Plan. They called it the Red House Plan because it took place at that hotel, and it's red, the Maison Rouge Hotel in Strasbourg on August 10th, 1944. And it was convened and supervised by this guy down here, Martin Bormann. There is some controversy about whether or not he escaped at the end of World War II. Supposedly he was killed. I think he probably was. But anyway, there was a spy in the room who heard the whole thing and reported back on it. The Red House Plan involved the relocation of Nazi officials, scientists, and resources to various locations around the world, particularly South America, to continue their work and influence. The goal was to ensure the survival of the Nazi ideology and to establish a Fourth Reich. So let's go through some key components of the plan here. Financial control. The Nazis aimed to maintain control over the global financial system through various means, such as the establishment of shell companies and the use of stolen assets. So in other words, they're going to get all that loot that they gathered up all over Europe, and then they're going to start reintroducing that into the economic system. And then gradually, as they build it up, to exert economic control throughout the world. Scientific advancements. The plan sought to preserve and advance Nazi research in fields like physics, aerospace, and medicine. This was achieved through the relocation of scientists and the establishment of research facilities in other countries. So remember what I was telling you about von Braun talking to his buddies down in South America? Anyhow, and we bankrolled the whole thing. And then political influence. The Nazis sought to infiltrate and influence various governments and organizations to further their goals. This was accomplished through the establishment of networks and the use of propaganda. In other words, psychological warfare. I think the German word here, if I pronounce it correctly, Weltanschauungskrieg. Weltanschauungskrieg means worldview war. So in other words, these guys were going to mold their people into the governments and probably all kinds of institutions all over the world. And, I don't know. I'd bet you any amount of money they got their hooks in BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. I'll bet you anything they got some influence in that too. All the shit that you see going on in the world, I think somehow or another, these guys place at least some influence in causing it. Essentially, it was a soft conquest of the world, an attempt to use economics, psychology, and science to achieve peacefully what they couldn't do militarily. Okay, this is also very important. This guy here, Reinhard Gehlen, he was the head of the German counterpart to the CIA. I'm just going to call it, for the sake of brevity, just going to call it the German CIA, even though they didn't call it that. During World War II, Gehlen was the head of the Foreign Army's East Section of the Abwehr, the intelligence service of the German General Staff. He was responsible for gathering and analyzing intelligence on the Soviet Union. Gehlen surrendered to the Allies at the end of the war and later used his knowledge and expertise to establish a new intelligence organization, the Gehlen Organization, which cooperated with U.S. intelligence agencies. So essentially, this guy already had a network of spies all through Eastern Europe and Russia. And so we just incorporated him into our intelligence services because they already had the network set up. Alan Dulles there, the guy on the bottom who was hip deep in the Kennedy assassination, did it. Dulles was a notorious Nazi sympathizer. Gehlen, of course, was a Nazi. So, in essence, the CIA was started by Nazis. Literally. There he is, man. And I've heard stories about how he would prepare reports and send them to Washington, and then the guys in Washington would just take the letterhead off and give them straight to the president to read for his morning briefings. Talk about a deal with the devil. So right there, you have a state actor, a Nazi, working in the CIA with all the access to the resources they had. And then you have this guy, Otto Skorzeny. Now, Skorzeny's a colorful character. He's kind of cool. His career's kind of illustrious. Anyway, Skorzeny was detained in an internment camp at Darmstadt awaiting the decision of a denazification court. On 27 July 1948, he escaped from the camp with the help of 3 former SS officers dressed in American military police uniforms who entered the camp and claimed that he had been ordered to take Skorzeny to Nuremberg for a legal hearing. Skorzeny afterwards maintained that American authorities had aided his escape and supplied the uniforms. He then moved to Spain, where he was granted political asylum and became involved in various business ventures, including arms dealing and working as military advisors to various governments. During the 50s, Skorzeny became involved in the formation of Nazi-inspired Odessa Network, which helped former SS members escape persecution and find new lives in various countries. He also became a prominent figure in the international neo-Nazi movement and was involved in the establishment of the Paladin Group, a private security and military consulting firm, probably kind of like Blackwater. He took his orders from Galen. So there you have it, a fascist internationale congealing around these people. And, you know, they were pretty much all over the place. I've known some of these people. I had a professor once who, man, he said he was a soldier. He said he was a German soldier, but he didn't say what kind of soldier. And he told some war stories, and, man, that guy, there was more to him than just being a private soldier. And then I knew a guy. He was the private pilot of a very high-ranking Nazi official, and he escaped, and he was working here in the United States. And, oh, my wife, she went to a Catholic school, and she knew this nun who was like the head mistress, the mother superior of the Catholic school. And she was, from what my wife described, she was a Nazi. So, you know, there's more to this whole subject than meets the eye. And I hope this can give you a platform from which to formulate your own research.
You must have been approached since the war by other nations to indulge in military activities of the kind you indulged in during the war. Is this correct?
It has happened, yes, exactly. And there is a lot of countries which are...
Would you name some of the countries?
Oh, I can name, for instance, United States of America.
They
were nearly the first one.
Is that so?
Something, yes.
What did they want you to do?
Oh, some special work.
You won't say exactly.
I wouldn't say it. You don't talk about it.
No. Have you been approached by countries like Cuba, for instance?
I was not officially approached, but unofficially I was approached also.
Was this by Castro?
It was first by Castro and now by the enemies of Castro.
Everybody
wants